All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I know there's a lot of places for MMA content. I deeply appreciate that you choose mine for supplemental listening. You know what? I've said this before. I don't care if you just put me on because something about my cadence and tone puts your kids to sleep. If I can help that in that respect, I will take it, and I will not feel badly about any use of my content that's put out there as a general rule. Okay? I shouldn't say that on the internet. There's way too many weirdos out there, but I assume you're not one of them. So, thank you for listening. It is Mother's Day as I record this, so a very happy Mother's Day to all of the moms, stepmoms, grandmothers. You are all deeply, deeply appreciated. My mother's fond of saying that she passed through the valley of the shadow of death to bring me into the world. Slight exaggeration. Um, I say that only because, like, there are still legitimate medical complications around pregnancy. She didn't have any of those. But, yeah. So, happy Mother's Day. Treat your moms right. I hope you did. Because I'm recording this on Mother's Day. You're listening to it after. So, if you didn't, do something nice for your mom, if at all possible. Uh, yeah, so what do we got on the agenda this evening? UFC 315 was last night. You know, I think I said it was like a B. I saw people say it was like B minus on paper, give or take. I think as far as the pay-per-view card goes, that's probably about right. As far on paper. Once you get to the prelims, it was took a little bit of a dive there. In practice, ups and downs, ups and downs. So we'll get into all of that. We will also preview UFC on ESPN 114. We're back in the warehouse. Yay, warehouse fights. That event is going to be headlined by Gilbert Burns and Michael Morales, so we'll get there. We'll preview that then. A little bit of news. It's been kind of quiet on the news front. A lot of news. Was waiting for UFC 315 to wrap up, for the fallout of that to really kind of settle. So, medical issues and whatnot, and then we'll see more of that going forward. I imagine this coming week we'll have a fair amount of news. Maybe not every big thing that we were kind of waiting for, but dude, they have got to get stuff for UFC 316, right? 315 is Merab and O'Malley in your headliner. 316 is International Fight Week. They have got to get stuff announced for that. They are rapidly running out of time. And there was a lot that was waiting on how this played out to kind of figure out what's next. So we'll get into that. Y'all know the drill. Please, anything you can do to interact with the product is appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, sharing on your social media platform of choice or in your social life. If you know a human being that is interested and you want to talk to them and tell them about the show if you think they'd be interested, please point them in my direction. I appreciate it. All right, with that out of the way, let's jump into this, shall we? So UFC on ESPN, excuse me, UFC 315. Wow, wrong part of my notes. UFC 315. How'd the predictions go? Let's start there. I had a good night in general. It should have been better. Went 9-3. I got everything right except for the last three fights. How do I feel about that? Um, Aldo should have won. More on that in a minute. I scored the Fior and Shevchenko fight for Fior. I'm probably in the minority there, and I'm not going to die on that hill. I did not think much of that fight. And, oh, the main event. My brother tried to talk me into JDM for a couple of different instances during the week. I should have listened to him. Um, I should have listened. That's hindsight. I mean, my reasons for picking Bilal were fine. I was not alone in picking him. Uh, if you'd told me, not who won, but if you'd given me a couple of the basic stats from the fight, Like, here's how many takedowns Bilal's going to attempt over the course of the fight. If you'd just given me that and then said, okay, and it goes the distance. So give me those two caveats. It's going to go the distance. Here's the number of takedowns Bilal attempts over 25 minutes. Don't even have to tell me which rounds, like the round break, but like that's how much wrestling was done by Bilal Muhammad over the course of this 25-minute fight. Do you think he won or not? At that point, I would have leaned towards JDM. Not huge. They're not like, oh, Bilal can't possibly win under those circumstances. That's an exaggeration. But like, who do I think was going to win that kind of thing? Yeah, would have been Jack. But I can't predict the future. In that respect, I'm making educated guesses. That's really all you can do. And yeah, everything else I got right. Oh, I didn't pick for the Benoit Saint-Denis fight last week because his fight with Joel Alvarez was canceled, I mentioned, and I wasn't sure if they were going to seek a replacement. I should have mentioned. Probably was just going to pick him in the dark, and I did pick him. Uh, I hope it's not unreasonable to say that, like, oh yeah, Benoit Saint-Denis was fighting Kyle Prepelic, and I picked BSD. Like, I hope that's not a big reach. Like I'm just trying to pad my numbers, because I'm not. If I was trying to pad my numbers, I would have switched my pick. I would have like claimed I switched my pick with Aldo and Zahabi after they changed the weight class. But again, we'll get to that fight when we get to that fight. So year to date, so that 9-3 brings me to 147, 47 and 1. So yeah, got to the 100 mark ahead of where I. That's not an insurmountable lead. Like there could still be an epic collapse on my part, but I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling okay. Still like to get it better, but man, the judging last night was such ass. Sorry for the profanity, but man, I almost have to talk about that separately to actually talking about the fight. So before we get into the specifics of the individual fights, let me just throw the following out there. Two judges gave Bilal Muhammad the first round of that main event, which is ridiculous. You could have had it 2-2 if you gave him, I think it was the third. I think 2 and 3 were both moderately close. I think 3 was closer than 2. But one of those two was close enough that I'm not up in arms over him getting it, and he clearly won the fourth, did Bilal Muhammad. So 2-2 going into the fifth is not unreasonable, but the first round going to Bilal Muhammad is just silly. Like, that's just silly. Co-main event, again, I'm not going to die on the hill that I scored that for Fior because I think it hinges on the fifth. I don't know. I'd have to look at which round might theoretically be. I'd have to rewatch the fight to go through how I felt about it. There were only a couple of clear rounds. 1 to Shevchenko very clearly, 4 to Shevchenko fairly clearly. I think 2 and 3 to Fior is not complicated. So I think 5 would have been the swing round. It's 5 or it's 3, I suppose, depending on how you want to feel about it. And again, I'd have to go back and really kind of go through the fight to try and figure out which one, and I don't care that much. Jose Aldo should have beat Eamon Zahabi. There's a better argument for 30-27 Aldo than there is for 29-28 Zahabi in my estimation, but I might be overly emotionally attached to that one. So I will freely acknowledge that. What was the other? There was some other bad judging. I mean, the fact that JDM almost lost the main event going into the fifth round, unless he turned in kind of the performance he did. Oof. Yeah, the Bukowskis and Iwan Kutalaba fight. Whenever you have a 30-27 each way, there's some BS. It's rare you get fights that are legitimately that close. This one wasn't. In the following way. Giving round 1 to Kutalaba is kind of crap. Giving round 3 to Bukowskis is crap. I scored it for Bukowskis live. 29-28 Kutalaba is not unfair because the second round is just one of those rounds. But all 3 rounds either way is crap. Only one 10-8 in the Sterling and Ursulan fight was a little odd. Yeah, there was just... Man, Daniel Cormier just sounded so sad on commentary when they announced the Bukowskis and Kutalaba decision. He said, "Oh, that's crap." Like somebody just kicked his dog or something. They just... Again, 30-20, when you get a 30-27 each way, like there's some weird... There was an absence of the usual judges on this card. Let me just, for the sake of my own curiosity. So yeah, like for the main event, we had, let me see who you might recognize. We had Michael Bell, Eric Colon, and David Theron. And I think only Colon really had the right scorecard. Take a look at Bell for just a sec. He's okay. He's been going for a little bit, but man, yeah, okay. He's kind of been around. Let me be fair to him. Theron, on the other hand, not so much. Not nearly so much. Then let me have a look at So Shevchenko and Fior had Sal D'Amato, that semi-sentient can of tomato soup. Chris Lee, who's kind of fine, and Guy Girard. Mr. Girard, this was his third. He's only on record judging 3 UFC fights ever. All 3 of them were on this card. He didn't seem all that far out of line with anyone else, though, so I'm not... Again, I'm not up in arms over it. A quick look at Bukowskis and Kutalaba here. So Jaron Vallel was the one who went 30-27 Kutalaba, and Vallel is he's an okay ref. He's an awkward judge. Wait a minute. Was I backwards on those rounds? Jeez, sorry. They're kind of looking at these scores is kind of throwing off my memory. Because 2 judges, including Sal over there, gave Kutalaba the first, and I can't remember. 1 and 3 I remember being the ones that like made the most sense to me, as one of them went to Kutalaba, one of them went to Bukowskis. I want to say it was 1 to Bukowskis and 3 to Kutalaba, but I might have that switched in my head. Anyway. So Vallel went all 3 to Kutalaba, which is, just, again, bad. And then Pasquale Procopio went all 3 to Bukowskis, which is also bad. Mr. Procopio hadn't judged a UFC event since 2016. His return to the UFC, as far as that goes, was in this event, and he judged 3 cards. Yeah, prior to this, the last time he judged a UFC event was UFC 206. When Emil Mack defeated Jordan Mean. Boy, that's a blast from the past. Emil Weber Mack. Hadn't thought about him in a minute. So there's that. What was the other? Was there another really bad one? No, but oh god, just some really awkward to bad cards, and I don't even know if I can get up in arms about this stuff anymore because clearly nobody cares enough to actually do anything about it. Look, I know a bunch of those commissions are like, some of them are not staffed by bad people, some of them have good intentions. I'm going to try to be charitable here. But for whatever reason, they just like can't actually make any sort of substantive change that actually addresses some of these problems. They'll do more training behind closed doors, and they'll maybe try to rework some of the scoring criteria, and it doesn't fix the problem. It just doesn't. Ugh. All right, so with that out of the way, main event, Jack Della Maddalena defeats Bilal Muhammad via unanimous decision, 248-47 and a 49-46. I yelled about the scoring already. Giving the first round to Bilal Muhammad is just bad. It's just a bad scorecard. How did this fight go? So, couple of things here. I got to give a few bits of credit to JDM. His footwork for, like, certainly the first 3 rounds, it didn't start to be a problem for him until the 4th. His footwork for the first 3 rounds was really good. Did a really good job of not being against the cage, which it doesn't remove Bilal Muhammad's offense, but it neuters it. I think the best offense Bilal had was probably his left body kick. He landed some punches. I don't mean to say he didn't, but he never really like bothered Della Maddalena with the punches. And Jack's jab was working. Both guys doing a lot of stance switching. But Jack's striking just smoother. JDM has one of the best bits of boxing for MMA in the sport, in the UFC certainly. No disrespect to Max Holloway, right? But if you look at actual like boxing, JDM has really good boxing for MMA, not just like punching. And I know Max does more than punching, but just stay with me here. His upper body movement is real good. His defense is pretty tight. Not impenetrable, but no one's is in MMA. His counterpunching was working pretty good. His combination work, he was mindful about not setting his feet too much to throw like really long combinations, because then Bilal could level change on you. But when he'd get like 3 or 4 off, they were good combinations. He's got good hands. Showed some good front kicks, showed uppercuts. Showed a lot of stuff to try and dissuade Bilal from shooting. And he actually knows how to use the high guard to dissuade takedowns, which is it's definitely a thing. Cormier talked a little bit about it. You have your hands up like you're in the high guard, and when they start to level change, you level change with them, get your head in front of theirs, and your arms are there to kind of start framing inside of their reaching arms right away. As with all things, there's pluses and minuses to it, but he did a good job of that. That was one of the things that dissuaded Bilal from shooting as much as he might normally do. Other thing about this one really kind of stuck out to me. Anytime they would clinch up, Bilal would try to, if they got to the fence, which they did on occasion, Bilal would then try to level change, and if he can't get the takedown, he tries to go behind and get to the back. Standard stuff. He's pretty good at it. JDM had a counter ready for that. He had a good whizzer going. Anytime Bilal looked to step behind him, he'd threaten a Harai Goshi, which is stepping all the way across and then throwing them over your hip. An Uchimata is leg between theirs. I think a lot of times you'll just hear them referred to as whizzer kicks by wrestlers because they don't draw necessarily the same distinction between those two setups, and judo does, but that's only if you really kind of nerd out about that stuff. And it's just an awkward position to try and actually finish that throw. But Bilal has to address it every time. And it means he kind of has to break the body lock, because if he holds on to it, that actually increases the likelihood of getting thrown. You disconnect a little bit so that if they overcommit to the throw, then you really get the back. And there's not as much securing you to them. Because if all they've got is the arm over, if all they have is the whizzer, their overhook of your underhook, it's a lot harder to finish that throw. If you're kind of pressing into them and you're kind of attached to them, you make it a little bit easier. So you give up some space there to avoid being thrown. And every time he'd do that, Jack would instantly turn into him, use the separation to disengage, or press Bilal into the fence briefly and then disengage with an elbow strike. He was really well prepared for Bilal's fence wrestling in particular, and he had a lot of stuff ready for it. So really good on him there. Hit a giggler in the 5th round. Oh, he almost punted this. He almost Steve Ursegged it. So we're into the 5th round. It's going JDM's way in the 5th round, but they tie up and he kind of tries a lat dump. So he's got, it's his left hand that's under Bilal's right. So slight difference between a lat dump and a trap dump. It's where your hand is. If you're under the arm grabbing the lat muscle, it's a lat dump. If you're over top grabbing the shoulder or the top, like where the trapezius is, trap dump. You grab there and then you grab the knee. It's similar to a knee tap, but a knee tap doesn't actually doesn't really grab onto the other guy's body as much. It's more like hit that and then you kind of just shove. Frankie Edgar does that a lot. He used to do that a lot. Just tap the knee, get them a little bit off balance, and the other hand pushes. And you can off balance guys. That's really in the weeds stuff, so I apologize if you don't care about that. But he goes for one of those. And Muhammad reads it, and because they're running almost straight back, he avoids getting his knee kind of entangled, sets himself and transitions beautifully into this like slightly modified lateral drop. Really nice takedown from Bilal. Gets on top in half guard, and somewhere like, oh boy, JDM might have just punted. JDM, to his credit, gives it a sec, regains his breath, waits, and then that's where he hits the giggler. Is off balances Bilal, gets in motion, gets back up, and just tees off on him again to get the round back. It's really good stuff from JDM overall. Few things about this that need to be pointed out. The height difference was legit. JDM is not, look, Bilal's not exactly like a small welterweight, but he was giving up some size here, and it really played into how some of this went down. The age gap was another one I did not quite give full credence to because there's an 8-year gap there. JDM is 28. I know he doesn't look it, but he's 28 and Bilal's 36. That's an important 8-year gap. Dude, JDM is just now starting to hit his prime, so good on him. There's a few things that have come out of this that I want to address. One is like the notion that Bilal Muhammad bought in too much to his own hype, as far as like the Canelo hands and whatnot, and let me address this. I don't think it's untrue that Bilal, relative to JDM, might have had a slightly inflated sense of his own striking prowess. I don't think he's a dumb fighter. He's not a dumb man. But you do have to have delusional self-belief to be a professional fighter. I do think he bought into it a little bit, and it's not because he wasn't... Look, again, he's not Merab. Like, what Merab does is inhuman. Like, wrestling that much is exhausting in ways that are difficult to quantify if you've never done it. You can't wrestle for 25 minutes. Even Merab can't wrestle for 25 minutes. He takes breaks because wrestling is just exhausting. So Bilal not trying to do a Merab impression, I get. And a lot of Bilal's takedown work, it comes in the clinch, and a lot of it is mat returns. And mat returns, especially if you just get the back standing first. Mat returns are not easy, but they are easier than most other forms of takedown. That's why they don't score. They don't score at all in amateur. That might vary depending on specific rule set, but at a minimum, they don't score the same as a regular takedown do mat returns. Because they're easier. Not easy, but easier. I mean, that's what he did to Leon, was just mat returned him repeatedly. So he's a little bit better at doing that than he is at like just double legging you relentlessly. Because he's not quite that guy. But there's a couple of things here that I understand you can't always do the same thing because everybody will get a read on it. So when I say the following, understand that I'm not saying that there aren't legitimate reasons he might have taken this approach. There are, but this is my observation on the matter. Bilal Muhammad, Dominic Cruz mentioned this on the broadcast about this fight. Whoever was going forward was kind of the one winning. JDM did a little bit better job like angling and countering when he was pressured, especially earlier. That fell apart a little bit down the stretch, especially the fourth round. But Bilal Muhammad, I don't mean to be disparaging of him when I say the following, because he's not alone in this. He can't win a fight going backwards. Everything about his game is predicated on forward motion. And the fact that he spent so little time advancing throughout the big chunks of this fight is really the telling stat for me. Like, he kind of let JDM dictate the terms for large stretches of this fight. Dictating the real estate, dictating the motion. And Bilal, if he's not the one going forward, a lot of his game doesn't work nearly the same. And he did not try to pressure JDM the same way he pressured, Sean Brady or Leon Edwards. He didn't do that. A lot of reasons. Not saying there's no good reason for him to have changed things up. There are good reasons for him to have changed things up. But when you kind of bail on that big a part of your game, like that's one of the fundamental conditions for success for Bilal Muhammad. If you take away that, you got a real problem. So that was a big problem for him. Also, again, I don't expect him to be Marab. But take a second on this one. He only attempted one takedown in the first round. I would have expected that to be a tad higher. He didn't get it. But, I mean, even that attempt wasn't a real attempt if memory serves. That's someone like, hey, remember I can do this? And maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't, but it's not, it's more to put it into your head. Than anything else. He tried 3 in the second round. See, that's more what I expected in the first. He didn't get any in the second round either. Jack's takedown defense was very good. And again, some of these are not really committed takedown attempts, but they're more than feints at it, so you kind of got to count it. He didn't even try one in the third, which I might have to go back and rewatch this and see if I agree with all these stats. I don't take too many issue with most of the stats gathered. He did get one in the fourth, which led to a fair amount of control time, and he won the fourth round, despite being outstruck. Good grief, by a significant margin. Okay, here's the other thing about this. If you're not aware of the following, the UFC broadcast will put stats up. Those are unofficial, and in fact are almost always wrong. Those numbers almost never agree with the numbers that are arrived at when the people who do the stats go back, because those are live numbers that are produced like for the broadcast. A little bit later, like there's guys watching the other fight in real time or in slow-mo, and they're kind of going through things in more detail for the official stat line. It almost never lines up with what they show. For strikes in particular. Some of the other stuff is easier to like, oh, that was a submission attempt. Yes, it was. Not a lot of controversy there. So a lot of those stat lines that were being shown on the broadcast are not what you see if you go to the UFC stats page now and look at the fight. Just minor point there, in case you weren't aware of it. Because, yeah, JDM outstruck him in every round. Some of them were a little closer if we go, like, significant instead of total. But every round was more strikes landed by Jack Della Maddalena. And the 5th round is the big one. I mean, he really outlanded him there. But again, on the takedown side of things, Bilal did get 2 of 2 in the 2nd round. Again, one of those was a counter to JDM trying to wrestle him. Had little over 90 seconds of control time, but didn't do... did he not? Was that the one he really didn't do a whole lot with? He did. He dropped a couple of short elbows in that one, but... look, here's the other thing again. Bilal's total control time, which includes fence work and not just on the mat stuff, right, was like 3 minutes and 20 seconds of a 25-minute fight. He absolutely couldn't beat JDM without control time that was significantly higher than that. Like on the order of 10 minutes more than that, give or take. Just couldn't get control. Wonder if they have the... There's a fairly useless stat for the most part that I moderately wanted to see for this one. I wanted to see how much time was spent advancing by each party. Because normally that's a much higher number for Bilal, and it wasn't for this fight. So, then again, like I said, that's largely a useless stat for the most part, but when you're dealing with trying to figure out a pressure-based fighter's work like that, it can be helpful to see. So, Bilal didn't wrestle. Now, again, there's a few things going on there. A lot of JDM's footwork really messed with Bilal's wrestling. Bilal's wrestling in open space is not the same at all as it is against the fence. He has a lot more success when he gets you against the cage as a general rule. And this needs to be said as well. Craig Jones has figured out a lot of fence wrestling in MMA. He has a lot of answers for that. He worked with Volkanovski to help him get ready for Makhachev, and dude, Volkanovski handled Makhachev's fence wrestling for the most part. He worked here, and JDM, who struggled against Burns, didn't struggle nearly as much here. Like I don't mean to say it was easy, but didn't get controlled nearly as much as he did before against Burns. Craig Jones had him well ready for a lot of Bilal's sequencing against the fence. Really well prepared for it. So what's next is still a little up in the air. Islam Makhachev doing the time to be a two-weight world champion thing. I'm not opposed to Makhachev doing that. I would actually like to see him at welterweight. I'm not joking about this. I would like to see him, if he goes his career without fighting at welterweight, we'll have lost something. Now, whether he needs to do that right away, or whether he should still fight Ilia Topuria first and then look at moving up, I don't know. Some of that's on what he wants to do. Some of that's on the calendar and the schedule. I don't know. But Makhachev or Rakhmonov seems like the most likely next fight for Jack Della Maddalena. And frankly, I'm okay with both of those. I'd still rather, in a lot of respects, I'd still rather see Makhachev and Topuria, but if that's just not in the cards, it's not in the cards, and I can't get too hung up on it. So this was a good fight. This was your fight of the night. deservedly so. The fifth round in particular was like bonkers. Um, if you didn't catch this one live, give it a watch. This was a good fight, which is weird to say about a Bilal Muhammad fight because you know, look, the Leon Edwards fight was not awful, but you kind of have to be like really invested in either the characters or positively or negatively, mind you, for that one. Or kind of really look at like some of the technique that's going on there to really get into Bilal and Leon Edwards. Um, this was a really good fight. It's on the fight of the year list. I don't know where it'll wind up, but it had been a minute since we had an addition to that list, at least on my end. Um, so good main event. As for Bilal, he's not getting an immediate rematch. I don't know. I mean, he's 36, man. It's not impossible to do some work at welterweight at that age, but that dude had to really go through it to even get his first title shot. He'd have to do something spectacular his next time out to get another one. There's a few guys at welterweight that form some interesting dynamics. We have to see what happens with Buckley and Usman, but at this point I do favor Buckley. Joaquin Buckley wants to fight Ian Machado Gary. Fair enough. Um, I say fair enough, like I don't dislike that fight at all. You got Sean Brady floating around there. He did get finished by Bilal Muhammad, and that was, it's a rough one to try and get back, but Brady seems to be rebounding these days. You've got Rachmanov, and now you've got Muhammad, all kind of in play. Sort of pursuant to what happens with JDM and what a few other people do and what the schedule winds up being, so. But welterweight's in a really good spot. I think we've been saying this for a little bit. Like, that's actually a healthy division. Um, so, hard to go wrong. Really hard to go wrong with matchmaking welterweight at the moment. Which doesn't mean they can't, it just means it's hard. Okay, co-main event. Valentina Shevchenko defeats Manon Fiorot via unanimous decision. 48-47 across the boards. Again, I was 48-47 for Fiorot, but not dying on the hill. This was not a great fight. I give Manon Fiorot a little bit of credit here. She had a tough first round. Rebounded, got back into the fight. Good for her. Shevchenko then made a few adjustments, but Fiorot just a little bit slower than Shevchenko. Relied a lot on busy work in the clinch to try and get rounds, which had, again, clearly not the results she intended. But her physical strength was a problem for Shevchenko. The real problem was, Fiorot just kind of would lumber into punching range, and that meant, like, for the first time in a while, Shevchenko's lead hook, which is right hand because she fights southpaw, was actually able to do work. And frankly, if you're fighting Valentina Shevchenko and you are not well schooled about dealing with her check right hook, your coaches have failed you miserably. It's one of the only things she does really consistently. The other thing about Fiorot, like, she couldn't get out of the way of the spinning back kick. She avoided a couple, but there was kind of a quick twitch speed differential that she struggled to really overcome consistently with reliable, effective offense. Her clinch game was pretty solid. She's landed some good elbows in the clinch, actually. There's elements of her clinch game that her dirty boxing is a real thing. Her physical strength is definitely a thing. But Shevchenko ultimately gets the win. She has been the flyweight title picture basically since its inception. I know Nico Montano won it and was supposed to fight Shevchenko, but then for a variety of reasons that never happened. This was Shevchenko's, like, what was that ridiculous stat? Like her 8th title fight in a row? Hang on. So she wins the belt from the vacant belt from Joanna in December of 18. So yeah, and since then only title fights. So let's just take a quick look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Good grief. 12 title fights in a row. Just nutty. And she only lost one of those. Then had the draw that she should have won, but I yelled about that already. For her to be at her age, because she's 30, what, 7, still doing this, still being, successful. Um, One of the more, I mean, she even had a really serious kickboxing career before ever moving into MMA. Um, I know that not all of her fights are super exciting. You will never hear me bang that drum. But her longevity and her success is no exaggeration, like the stuff of legend. You just don't find people that do that, male or female, in MMA, especially at the UFC level, who can do this. So good for her. She does seem to be slowing, and I don't know. There's a couple of options for her next. Um, Natalia Silva seems like the most logical one because she just beat up Alexa Grasso for 3 rounds. More on that in a minute. Uh, Fior getting back to the title scene isn't out of the question. She's gonna have to change a few things to do it though, because this was not a really great fight. So she'll have to show some things if she's going to get back here. Jasmine Jasdavicius is making a decent push. I think she's still a bit out of the title picture, but injury and schedule dependent. I don't think Shevchenko closes the year as champion. I'd be a little bit surprised. But she's still out there doing the darn thing. So, well, the other option for her next is Zhang Weili. And Henry Cejudo, bless him, he tries. He came out after this and says Val deserves the opportunity to be a double champ. Do Val versus Zhang Weili next. Unless Val cuts to 115, which she's not going to do because that's ridiculous for her, she doesn't win the strawweight belt fighting Zhang with Zhang moving up. Cejudo, he tries so hard. And I don't think Shevchenko could make 115. Not healthily, at any rate. That said, she could go. I said this when, Pennington was champion at 135. Shevchenko could beat her. She has beaten Juliana Pena. Shevchenko going up to 135 and fighting for that and getting that belt is not out of the question, given the state of women's bantamweight, which is a wasteland. So, a couple of options for Shevchenko. I have to see what a few other. The stars do seem to be aligning for Valentina and Zhang to square up. So we'll see. I mean, there's nobody really at strawweight for Zhang Weili at this point. I don't mean that there's nobody there who's a deserving contender. I more mean there's nobody there with a really giant mandate to go, no, you can't pursue greatness in a second weight class, you must fight me. And there's nobody really at flyweight. Again, Natalia Silva's she will probably wear that belt at some point, I think. She did some good work. More on that in a minute. But Shevchenko and Zhang just does better business. And that is a component of this. So Uh, yeah, so we have to see a little bit what they want to do with Shevchenko next, but you know what? One of the more remarkable careers in this sport. Certainly on the women's side of things. And, you know, tip of the cap to her for that one. Ayman Zahabi, this fight was supposed to be at bantamweight. Then Jose Aldo came in and weighed like 143. Just couldn't keep making the weight. So Zahabi stopped cutting. He got real close to 136. Rehydrated to 142. Weighed in. We moved it up to featherweight. I scored this for Jose Aldo. He won the first round pretty convincingly. Then Zahabi got a little bit more going in the second. Second is slightly closer. I think you could be confused by Zahabi's activity level. Um, in third round, Aldo early on just bludgeons Zahabi, hurts him with a knee, off balances him, hits him with this brutal legal soccer kick. Zahabi's kind of quad potted, so he's on his feet and hands, and Aldo just punts him in the face. Somehow does not knock him out. Zahabi kind of scrambles back up, gets knocked down again. So there's like three knockdowns for Aldo in the space of this bit, but Zahabi's like constantly running away from him. And then Aldo stops chasing because he's kind of gassed. And Zahabi is able to keep up a little bit of pressure, gets a takedown, spends the last little bit in full guard, just kind of dropping some short elbows. Again, I scored this for Aldo. That is a hill I might actually be willing to die on. Not that I think 29-28 for Zahabi is the worst scorecard possible, but I really thought Aldo won this one. Zahabi, you know what? Credit to him. He's kind of putting things together. So, you know, there's that. He just doesn't fight all that often is kind of the issue there. Aldo announced after the fight that he thinks he's done. His heart's not in it anymore. In fact, he said a little bit like, you know, during the weight cut, something inside of me was saying you don't have to do this anymore, and I listened to it. Um, he might. Let me phrase it this way. If he does decide he just wants one more, he'll do one more, like against Patricio Pitbull in Rio to be his final retirement fight. That wouldn't shock me. But I've gotta just say this out loud. So one, I think he won this fight. So the judges kind of did him. I think the judges got this one wrong. I'm not on the robbery train at the moment. If I rewatch it and feels very strongly, I might change my opinion on that. But Jose Aldo comes back to the UFC to kind of fight out his deal after a little bit of a retirement. And what did we waste his appearances on? UFC? He fought Jonathan Martinez, Mario Bautista, and Ayman Zahabi. This is what we did with the last three fights of Jose Aldo's career? We couldn't get him and Cruz together? We couldn't get him and Pitbull, who just signed? We couldn't. There's so many old guy fights that we could have done that were just, again, fun retirement tour style fights for this guy, and instead we wasted it with him fighting a couple, these like up and coming kind of bantamweights, and then him losing, a split decision to Bautista that he maybe should have won, depending on how bad you want to argue it, and this one that I think he should have won. This is what we did for the end of a legend's career. This was every bit as stupid as what you did with Anderson Silva. Every bit as stupid. And golly. If Aldo is actually done, I've said this before, like, God bless. The man was he made you have to have been watching him at the time, man. You have to have been one of those people watching him in WEC. You really do to get this. He made you rethink some of what was possible in MMA. This was a guy with no wrestling background, with some of the most ridiculous takedown defense the sport has ever seen. Insane hips, insane scrambling, powerful kicks, dynamite hands. He was one of the guys who grabbed the torch and said, the weight classes below 155 can be good, can be interesting, and are worth your time and attention. Jose Aldo did that. So if he has done nothing but my respect to that man. Nothing but. So a few people did come out, did bring up Anthony Smith gets a 10-minute retirement package, not exaggerated number for effect. But the best we can do for Aldo is a slightly awkward, the translated speech and then like a high five. And okay, let me be rational about this one for just a second here. Anthony Smith made it known he was in his last fight. Absolutely made it known. When Michelle Watterson retired, she made it known, my last fight. So they had a thing ready. Robbie Lawler, this is my last fight. They had a thing ready. If you tell the UFC in advance this is your last fight, they can get a thing ready for you. It's still a bad look. So I'm not going to throw the UFC under the bus for not having a well thought out, well prepared retirement package for Jose Aldo, given what happened. I'm going to say the following. It is bad optics to have given that to, again, your Anthony Smiths recently, while Stipe doesn't get one, while Aldo doesn't get one. The Stipe one, you should have seen coming. This one from Aldo, I don't know. Maybe you should have seen it coming. You should have known it was possible, bare minimum. But Stipe was telegraphed from left field. That was a smoke signal, not a telegraph. That he was done after that fight, win, lose, or draw. You really should have had something for Stipe under those circumstances, but you didn't because reasons. It's bad optics to give those kinds of send-offs to an Anthony Smith, and I'm not trying to dog on Smith. I said my piece about the thing he got when it happened, and I've softened a little bit on it. In the sense that, Smith's late career resurgence and just gutting through the trenches like he did, and I think a big part of it, and I said it at the time, the UFC likes Anthony Smith. The broadcast team likes him, the brass like him, so favoritism plays a bit of a role in that, and pretending otherwise is just foolish. So I'm not trying to kill Anthony Smith here. I'm really, really not. I'm just saying when a genuine legend, one of the all-time greats of the sport in Jose Aldo retires, and you got nothing for him other than an awkward interaction with Daniel Cormier, bad optics. I saw Luke Thomas mention this, that, a lot of, this is a little bit ghoulish, but if you know how obituaries are written, most places have an obituary or an in memoriam piece written for most celebrities. You'll go, if details come out about how they died, you might edit them to include that. But for the most part, the bones and a lot of the muscle of your piece for the death, in the event of the death of a celebrity or whatnot, are actually written out in advance. Because you never know. The UFC might do well to have a policy like that in place for these legendary fighters we all know are kind of on their last legs. Because, just again, bad optics for Jose Aldo to not have anything. I mean, it was bad when their big like retirement package for Dominic Cruz aired when he was doing commentary for a warehouse fight. Bad optics, man. Really bad optics. Women's flyweight next. Natalia Silva defeated Alexa Grasso, unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Alexa Grasso, just no sense of cage cutting. No way to pressure. She got led around for the vast majority of this fight. She got kicked at range. She kind of got sniped. If you can't control distance, if you can't manage distance, if you can't pressure and cage cut and get your opponent against the fence when you really need to in MMA, you can't win at this level. Something has gone very wrong in Alexa Grasso. I don't know what. I don't know if it's psychological. I don't know if it's physical. I don't know. But over the last little bit, stuff has changed for her for the negative. Silva, on the other hand, is like really, she looked really good here. She's in the title picture with this one, just to be very, very clear. She is absolutely in the picture. Benoit Saint-Denis defeated Kyle Prepolek via arm triangle choke, 2:35 of the second. Prepolek coming back to the UFC after an 0-2 run in like 18, I think it was. Let me double check that real fast. 19, excuse me. So he took this on short notice. So a couple of things about Benoit Saint-Denis came out in the lead up to this. His last few fights, he hadn't had a real coach. Which is, you can't do that, man. Not at this level. He's taking fights when he's like recovering from staph. Just some really weird risk assessment going on there. And man, his defense is just... it's not good. That man's head doesn't move when he enters into combinations or enters into striking range. He gets hit a lot. You can maybe kind of dog your way through Kyle Prepolek. You can't do that against guys who are any good, and he's found that out the hard way. So wherever he winds up, whatever coach he winds up getting, they've got some work to do. There's a lot of good raw materials there, willingness to fight, good power. This was a good finish, actually. If you look at how he set up the arm triangle choke, really, actually pretty good. Not knocking him for some of this, but the last few fights have exposed there is some work to do with this man. Hopefully he gets it done, but if he's not what we thought he was going into the Poirier fight, I think is at this point very safe to say. On the prelims, Mike Malott knocked out Charles Radke 26 seconds into the second round. Okay. Jasmine Jasdavicius bulldozed Jessica Andrade, chokes her out, 2:40 of the first round, not even close. Andrade is really past it, and Jasdavicius really seems to be hitting her stride. This was a good win for her. Modestas Bukauskas defeated Iwan Kutalaba via split decision. There was a 29-28 for Bukauskas, which is okay. I think that's what I had. And then a 30-27 for Kutalaba and a 30-27 for Bukauskas. Just, what are we doing here? Not a good fight, to top it off. Navajo Sterling defeated Ivan Urslan via unanimous decision, 2 29-28 and a 29-27. I was 29-27. I thought Sterling deserved a 10-8 in the third. Sterling came in with a little bit too much hype, I think. Got some skill, definitely has potential, but he came in at like 5-0, and you've really got to temper expectations for guys getting into the UFC that early. He's got a while before he gets like matured and fleshes out his game. On the early prelims, Marc-Andre Barrio defeated Bruno Silva via knockout, elbows and punches, 127 to the first. Silva missed weight, and he got knocked out bad here by some nasty elbows in the clinch. Barrio striking at distance leaves a little bit to be desired. His defense out there is a little weak. But his dirty boxing, his clinch fighting, that's where he kind of excels. And he got Silva there, and he kind of went to town. So, you know what? Got a good finish. Minor credit to the UFC here. They stretchered Silva out. He was complaining of neck issues. They didn't shy away from showing that he got stretchered out, which they have in the past. And for the rest of the card, when it was relevant, we did get medical updates on him. So, thumbs up. I remember when the UFC would not show a guy who was down for a long time, wouldn't show someone being stretchered out, and then you couldn't buy information about what was going on for the rest of the broadcast. So, this was handled well. Also, minor note related to this. Brendan Fitzgerald was on this event. He did analyst desk duties hosting it. He did the backstage stuff, and he did the roving reporter bit. That dude was hopping all night and was a professional the whole time. Big thumbs up to Brendan Fitzgerald. Give that man some more credit for the... He is a quality broadcaster. He really is. So, need to give him some credit. Daniel Santos defeated Zhongyong Lee via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Decent little fight here, but Santos is a little bit better. And kicking everything off, Beksat Almakhan knocked the stupid out of Brad Katona. 104 the first. Catches him coming in and level changing with a gnarly uppercut. Instantly slumps him. Dunzo. Almakhan gave Umar Nurmagomedov a few problems when they fought, and he did that on short notice. He's still got some work to do, Almakhan does. I don't think he's, instantly top of the division ready, but he's good. There's definitely some potential there, so. That's the full card. My report, of course, is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. You'll give it a read if you're so inclined. Your bonuses, fight of the night, I already mentioned, Jack Della Maddalena and Bilal Muhammad. Very well deserved. Performances went to Jazz Davicius and Barrio. I would have put Almakhan in there. I don't know who I would have removed. I might have done that over Barrio, but that's just me. Those are fine choices, so no issues there. Dana White no-showing the press conference after the event was an interesting move. Wonder if he just didn't want to answer questions about, ticket sales and the like. Anywho. So, already mentioned. Full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. I appreciate the heck out of it, so thank you very much for that. Alright. Let's get set for this next segment then, shall we? So... you know what? I didn't do too bad going through that. All right, UFC on ESPN Plus 114 will be coming our way this Saturday. We're back in the warehouse. We're very obviously back in the warehouse. I don't quite know what to say about that. I briefly looked at this card last week, and I got nothing, man. I don't hate the main event. Main event, Michael Morales and Gilbert Burns. So Michael Morales, 25, undefeated, 17-0. 5-0 in the UFC? Yeah. 3 of those stoppages, including he stopped Neil Magny in the first round, which is nothing to sneeze at. But then again, if you know how to calf kick, you can tear Magny up, and that's just kind of how he is these days. He's getting a big step up here. I mean, respect to Neil Magny, but Gilbert Burns represents a level above Neil Magny, as evidenced by when they fought. Burns, for himself, 3-fight losing streak. Now, let's be fair, those 3 fights are Bilal Muhammad, Jack Della Maddalena, and Sean Brady. I'm not going to kill you for losing to those 3 guys in a row. I'm just not. But It is still a 3-fight losing streak. He is still 38. This is going to figure out whether or not he's coming or going. If Burns can force this to the ground, he'll have some edge because his jiu-jitsu is still very, 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 very good. And Morales, I'm sure he's not a scrub on the ground, but he ain't Dorino on the ground. On the feet, that's a different story. And Morales, that's where he gets most of his work done. The odds are kind of reading the tea leaves. The younger guy, a 13-year age gap. The way Burns has looked a little bit lately, I wouldn't be super comfortable with the odds where they are. They're like plus 500 on Burns, and that might be asking for a little bit of trouble, but I'm going with Morales. I think Burns is a little bit past it. Next up, it's all downhill from here, folks. There is almost nothing else on this card. Paul Craig against Adolfo Bellato. So Craig, 3-fight losing streak, losses to Brendan Allen, Kyle Bahalio, and Bo Nickel. He's 1-3 since moving to middleweight, and when your only win is Andre Muniz, that's it could be worse. Bellato, a little bit slow, big guy, 12-2-1, 4-fight winning streak. What, 2-0 in the UFC? 1-0-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a draw with Jimmy Crute. He gets hit a lot, but Paul Craig isn't exactly a big threat on the feet. Once again, not odds I would be comfortable holding. We're looking like minus 500 for Bellato. I'm going to go with Bellato, but I wouldn't want to be sitting there having to pay out 3.5 to 1 on Paul Craig against a fairly, thus far, mediocre middleweight. Sadiq Youssef and Myron Santos next. Okay, if there's another fight on this card kind of worth paying attention to, it's probably this one. Well, Rosa and Costa's not awful, but so Youssef is moving up from featherweight, where he's been since like 2017. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, losses to Edson Barboza and Diego Lopez. The issue, again, is kind of activity. He was a year between beating Don Shainis and then losing to Edson Barboza. It was a decent fight. Then it was a little bit before he hasn't been seen since April of 24 when he lost to Diego Lopez. So he's been out of action for a little bit. Santos, 15-1, 5-fight winning streak, 2-0 in the UFC, wins over Con Offley and Francis Marshall. This is probably a little bit too much. Both guys are normally featherweight, fighting up at lightweight here. Probably a little bit too much for Santos at this juncture. I don't think Youssef is that far past it. The layoff is a little concerning. Odds are with Santos. I'm actually going to go with Youssef. Not going to be surprised if I'm wrong, but I think Youssef still has a little bit to give. Hang on, how old is he real fast? He's only 31, less than 20 fights, yeah. Middleweight next, Dustin Stoltzfus and Nursultan Ruzboyev. I'm going to have to type out one of those. That's just mean. Why do you make me doing this? Stoltzfus coming off a win over Marc-Andre Barrio. He's had a really rough UFC career. Started it with a 3-fight losing streak, then beat Dwight Grant, then lost to Abus Magomedov. Kind of saved himself by beating Punahele Soriano, then lost to Bruno Ferreira, then beat Barrio most recently. And Ruzaboyev, Had the loss to Joaquin Buckley down at welterweight. That was kind of an odd choice for him to go down there. Went back to middleweight, beat Eric McConaughey. We're back at middleweight here. This is probably Rozboyev. A quick look at the odds. Yeah, they agree with me. Let's see. Next up, again, this is the other fight maybe worth paying attention to. Julian Erosa and Melquiel Acosta. So Erosa coming off of a decent stretch, 3-fight winning streak, all 3 finishes, chokes out Ricardo Ramos and Christian Rodriguez, then TKOs Darren Elkins. That fight should have been stopped a lot sooner than it was. Costa has been a tad up and down in the UFC, but he's 23-7. 3-fight winning streak, 4-2 in the UFC. Recently wins over Shaila Nerdenbeke, Andre Fili, and Christian Rodriguez. This is not a bad fight. Could see this going either way. I don't know that I trust Erosa to really be that consistent at this point. Maybe a little bit unfair to him, but he's also having a fairly quick turnaround from the Elkins fight. And Costa's doing some pretty good work recently. Really good win he had over Rodriguez. I think I picked him for that, and he was the underdog. This one could legitimately go either way. So the odds are with Costa, but not huge. Minus 200, give or take. Don't know that I agree with that. Am I going to pick Erosa? Am I really going to say that I think Erosa's found that level of consistency? No. Let me asterisk this. I need to see something about both guys that I just, again, have not done a tremendous amount of tape study on these guys yet. Then at lightweight, Gabe Green and Matthews Camilo. So Green, this is welterweight, right? No, he's down to lightweight now. Okay. 2-fight losing streak up at welterweight to Ian Machado, Gary, and Brian Battle. Yeah, he's 2-3 in the UFC. Those have all been at welterweight. Again, real mixed results. Gonna try his hand at lightweight, see if that goes a little bit better for him. Camilo. He is Brazilian. I'm not sure where the accent is, or the emphasis. He's 9-2, 6-fight winning streak. This is his UFC debut. So, makes me think I'm going to go with Green. I don't know, Green. The odds are not with Green. Huh. Yeah, he does have a tendency to gas, doesn't he? And I don't think cutting down is going to fix that. He will probably have a size edge. Alright, I'm going to go with the odds, but I am not confident in that one. And that's your main card. On the prelims, Jared Gordon and Thiago Moises. Gordon, 36, been through the ringer, though. Coming off a split decision loss to Nasrat Haqparast. I kind of thought he won that fight. Moises, good guy. 30. Fought in January and beat Trey Ogden. Um, Moises is pretty solid. Gordon's pretty solid. Odds have this basically as a pick 'em, maybe slight leaning towards Moises. I agree with that. Um, I'll go with Moises. Let's see. Luana Santos and Tainara Lisboa. So let me double check something real. I gotta double check these guys real fast. So let's see. Santos 8-2, 3-1 in the UFC, coming off a loss to Casey O'Neill. She looked okay before that. Lisboa 7-2. 5-fight winning streak, 2-0 in the UFC. Wins over Jessica Rose Clark and Havana Oliveira. I'm probably just going to trust the odds on this one. I don't have a strong feeling. Odds are a little bit with Santos fairly close. Sure. That's really me just going with the odds. Featherweight next. Yadier Delvalge? Where are you from, sir? I'll look that up. He takes on Connor Matthews, so... Oh, you are Cuban. Ooh, so Yadier... Maybe Yadier, because Cuban. Cuban Spanish. So Yadier. French, you would drop the end of that. Delvalge? They do a slightly weird thing with the double L. It's not quite the ya it is in Mexico, but it's not quite the ja that you get in like Colombia or Spain. All right. So not sure. Anyway, 8-0 as a professional is Del Valle. I'm gonna go with that gringo pronunciation until I hear how it's properly pronounced. Coming off the Contender Series, okay. Matthews, he's had a rough go in the UFC. 7-3, but he's 0-2 in the UFC. Losses to Dennis Bazukia and Jose Delgado. The tea leaf reading is Del Valle. See, do the odds agree with that? Yeah, fairly heavily. Again, I wouldn't be... Not sure I'd agree with them being that heavy, but, I do get at least part of that logic. All right. Next up, strawweight Elise Reed and Denise Gomes. So Reed, coming off a win over Jessica Penne, does a lot of like taekwondo stuff, a lot of side kicks. Hang on, assuming I'm not confusing her with someone else, I need to double check that. I am not. As I mentioned, 8-4, 4-4 in the UFC. Gomes is a weird one. She's 10-3, 4-2 in the UFC. 2-fight winning streak, a split decision over Eduardo Mora, and then a win over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Logically, this should be Gomes, but here's the thing. She's like 5'2", with 63 inches of reach. And Reed is... She's not that much bigger, 5'3", so okay. I thought Reed was taller and longer than she is. I think the odds are with Gomes rather heavily. Yeah, I can see Reed winning this for the record, so I'm not like on the plus 500 bandwagon here. But Reed struggles a little bit when she like gets into a violent, like ugly fist fight, and that's kind of what Gomes does. Flyweights next: Hyun Sung Park and Carlos Hernandez. Look here. So Park is undefeated, 9-0. 2-0 in the UFC with wins over Seunguk Choi and Shannon Ross. He's been out of action for a minute. His last fight was December of 23. Two fights fell out between then. Fights with both Andre Lima and Niam Jargal. Niam Jargal Tumen Denbarel. How do I do better with Tumen Denbarel than his first name? But so the layoff's a bit of a concern here. But he looked pretty good up until that point. And Hernandez, 10-4, 3-3 in the UFC. Coming off a split decision win over Tumen Denbarel that I'm not sure he should have won. His losses in the UFC are Alan Nascimento, Tatsuro Taira, and Rei Suruya. So decent names to lose to. He kind of got a little fortunate on that Dennis Bondar technical decision. I think this is Park. Hernandez is not a bad fighter, but if the layoff hasn't completely rusted Park up, this seems like a little bit of a get-well fight after the layoff. And kicking everything off at strawweight, Tisha Pennington and Luana Pinheiro. This is probably going to be a slog. So Pennington 14-7, coming off a win over Carla Esparza. It was Esparza's retirement fight, if memory serves. Prior to that, she lost back-to-back split decisions to Mackenzie Dern and Tabitha Ricci. She deserved to lose both of those, to my estimation. So Pinheiro's getting a little bit of a notable name here. She's 11-4, 3-3 in the UFC, but on a 3-fight losing streak to Amanda Hebos, Angela Hill, and Jillian Roberts, and she really needs to justify her spot on the roster here. The odds actually really favor Pennington. This does seem to be the kind of fight that she tends to win. And man, that 3-fight skid for Pinheiro is no bueno. I don't know. Pennington's not exactly, in the prime of her career, though. She's 35. Is there a massive size issue here? It's a non-trivial one. I'm not going to buck the odds just for the sake of doing it. You know what? Sure, I'll take a flyer here. Let me ask this, because that might be one of those ones I wake up tomorrow and go, you're an idiot, what did you do? But at the moment, I'll take the flyer on Pinheiro. Probably foolish. And that's the card. So Saturday, MMAZona411mania.com. Y'all know that. Come by, say hello. Always appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Okay. Let's get through some news here, and then I am very tired. I've been up for quite a while at this point, so. All right. Robert Whittaker. Here's kind of the bigger news point here. Robert Whittaker versus Reiner de Ridder has been booked for July. I think it's the July 26th card, so they'll be in Abu Dhabi for that one, yes? Yeah. That's your main event. I am fine with that. Also on that card at the moment is Asu Almabayev and Ramazan Temirov. That's actually a pretty good flyweight fight. So, you know what? That is coming along. It's only 2 fights. And there's a while to go before we get there. But, poor Robert Whittaker welcoming these just awkward guys who... I think I talked about this a little bit like last week when talking about de Ridder. Like, middleweight is kind of home to the weirdos. And then you got Robert Whittaker, who's like really technically proficient. Like, how do I keep losing to these guys? Yeah, I don't have a pick for that one yet, but you know what? I'm okay with that fight. That's a pretty good fight. Okay, I mentioned. Okay, here's another bit of news. This got erroneously circulated um, as Jon Jones not wanting to fight Tom Aspinall, instead choosing Nate Diaz. When you phrase it like that, you're implying there's going to be some kind of a fight. There's not going to be a fight between them. Jon Jones and Nate Diaz have both agreed to coach a knockoff of The Ultimate Fighter that airs in Russia. I find this to be a waste of everyone's time. Well, certainly Jon's. Fight Tom Aspinall already. Nate can do whatever he wants. They're getting paid, fair play. This is just going to put the belt on ice for a little bit longer while they shoot and everything, so if you were expecting some kind of resolution to the Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall saga in the near future, well, not so much. So that the UFC could strip Jon Jones at this point, and I wouldn't bat an eyelash at it. Not a little bit. All right, last thing I have here. So, minor bit of drama that happened. I don't normally cover this, but I'll be brief. So, former UFC middleweight and light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira, good old Poetan, put out a tweet saying he was frustrated with the UFC at the moment. Not like angry, just, a little bit frustrated. And, he'd been considering that he might be done fighting. Then a little bit later, he says, I didn't say that, I was hacked. That would be the weirdest hack job ever. If you hacked Poetan's Twitter, would it be to just tweet out something that is entirely in line with what the vast majority of fighters have expressed about the UFC in the most benign way possible? This was not a tirade. This was not a vitriolic spew. This was not even a super bitter tweet, at least to my reading. It was a little bit of public negotiation, a little bit of expression of frustration with negotiation. That's all fair. That's normal even. But I don't discount the possibility that he's telling the truth, but I find it very, very, very unlikely. I think he was frustrated with something about the UFC, probably about the calendar, because the UFC just wants you to fight on their schedule. And if he can't for injury or whatever reason, and then they're like, okay, you don't get the next title shot then, because we want the belt defended on this date. And if you can't make it, somebody else will. Then, if you're Poetan and you kind of saved the UFC's 2024, I could understand a little bit of frustration. Couldn't you? So I remember when Conor McGregor got hacked and it was just spews of vile things. Or when Kamaru Usman got hacked and it was tweets at Conor about things Kamaru was going to do to Conor's mother. That's what happens when you get hacked. For the most part, this would be very, very awkward. So, a little bit of public negotiation, I think, and, Poetan expressing moments of frustration. But, guys, doing the UFC a solid might pay off for you. Not saying it never does. But the number of guys who have done the UFC solids expecting reciprocity that never come close to getting it is much, much larger. That is a much, much, much larger percentage of the roster and of fighters than those that get what they feel they deserved or adequate recompense from the UFC for just being a company guy. It just doesn't really happen as much, to the extent that it ever did. It's debatable. But there was that. So, yeah, that's the news. I'm going to check the old social media, see if anything's broken in the MMA space. If not, we'll do plugs and get out of here. Okay, nope, I don't see anything new. So, Where are you? There you are. Sorry, that was not properly set up. So, some plugs. There is no Damn You Hollywood this week. Last week, myself, Mark Radulich, and David Wright got together and reviewed Thunderbolts, * New Avengers, * Dark Avengers. I don't feel bad about that show. A little bit. For reasons beyond anything any of us had a lot of control over. Just, Mark was having one of those days. I was having one of those days in some respects. Nothing about each other, nothing about even that movie necessarily, but I like the review, so give it a listen if you're so inclined. You can find that over on the W2M network, or search Damn You Hollywood on your podcast platform of choice, and you'll probably find me over there. Okay, I think that's it for me. So, SmackDown on Friday per usual, UFC event on Saturday per usual. And next week we will be back here to review UFC on ESPN Plus 114 and preview UFC on ESPN 68. We're still in the warehouse. Headlined by Aaron Blanchfield and Macy Barber with the laziest fight poster of all time. Good grief. Okay, tell me there's something else on this card. Gamrot and Klein I don't hate. Is that it? Jeremiah Wells back in action. Moderately curious. Jafel Filio and Alon Nascimento. Gotta see if Nascimento's ever gonna actually make a real push. Yeah, this is not a very strong card. It's not the worst. But that is not exceptionally strong. Full preview next week. Y'all know the drill on that. So that does it for me for this week. Thank you again very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.